Welcome, Representative Knight.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for hearing this bill today. This is not the first time this bill's been put into the General Assembly. It's the first time I've been a sponsor. It was previously had Chairman Shanley had put it in. It provides in a fairly comprehensive fashion a way for families, patients, and loved ones of folks who are in nursing homes or assisted living facilities to place a camera for electronic monitoring of their loved one while they're in the facility. This is about giving families and patients a sense of security, particularly after COVID, when there were so many people who were basically locked into assisted living facilities and nursing homes in particular, and the families couldn't really have access because of fears of infection and fears of COVID, which were legitimate at the time, but I know it gave a lot of people a lot of angst. There have been occasions when patients have suffered at the bad outcomes in these facilities, either at the, through the negligence of some and sometimes the outright bad acts of workers in these facilities. And this is not in any way to suggest this is the norm, but once in a while there's a bad apple. So I think that the bill takes advantage of the technology that's available today and is being increasingly used in our society to allow for monitoring for a good purpose. That is just to keep an eye on what's going on with grandpa or grandma in the nursing home. I know that there's a lot of testimony. I know that the industry has some serious concerns, and those concerns need to be taken account of. But I think that they should not be able to obstruct the bill. And I think the best way to think about this is when you have this sort of electronic monitoring in any milieu or in any walk of life, there's two ways to think about it, and a set of assumptions and a set of actions that come from those two ways. One is to think about that sort of monitoring as adversarial, and to get all bent out of shape that you're being monitored when you're in the room with somebody, and have a sense of like I'm in the spotlight, people are judging me or they're looking after me to see if I do something wrong. And that is not the intent of this bill. The other way to think about this sort of electronic monitoring is collaborative for the safety and health and benefit of the patient or the resident of the facility. If everyone's doing their job right, there shouldn't be any issues. And to have the extra layer of security provided by the family, being able to keep an eye on their loved one, I think is a net benefit for society and certainly for the patients and residents at our nursing homes as the nursing homes go about the difficult job of making everybody comfortable and make the days for the residents pleasant and go for it. As long as it's a collaborative process where everyone's looking for the same goal, which is to provide a comfortable existence for the residents, I think that this bill moves that ball forward. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative. I had family in this situation. You bring things from home that make you feel comfortable and make you feel like you're at home, and then things disappear. I've been reading the bill, and if you have a roommate, both people would have to agree, or you get moved out. How about a resident that cannot make this decision, but the family wants them to do that? What's the provision for that?
There's actually this bill is well thought out. I mean, I didn't write it, but I appreciate the fact that the drafters really put some thought into it. On page 2, there's a section 23-17.29-2 that says who can be a representative who allows the electronic monitoring, and it can be it certainly can be the resident, a resident representative, and a resident representative is either a court-appointed guardian, the resident's spouse, the resident's parent, or a healthcare agent acting under a durable power of attorney, and it gives the citation in our law.
Thank you. Representative Potter has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not a question, Rep Knight. I just want to thank you for putting this bill in. Anecdotally, I'll say I've heard from a couple of constituents throughout the last year and a half, 2 years, who have brought this bill up and really asked for it. And of course, like anything that we hear related to care standards in nursing home, really leaves an impression on me. And I think when my mother was in a nursing home, I didn't have to really worry about the level of care that she was getting, because there's some people that I've seen here tonight that were taking care of my mother and I could trust in them. But I can imagine people that don't have that same level of confidence, why they would want something like this. And secondly, Madam Chair, I just want to say for the record, when I'm looking through the sign-up sheet here, I see a number of people who have signed up against this, but are not speaking. And I'll only speak for myself personally. I find that disappointing that people come and oppose bills like this without being willing to answer questions that the committee may have. So again, Rep Knight, thank you for the bill. Strongly support it, and I hope that we move forward on it this year.
Thank you, Rep Potter. I really appreciate that. And I do want to add just one thing and say before, I understand this is a change. I understand there's a lot of hoops to jump through for the facility and the bill as written, and I'm certainly open to ideas about how to streamline this so that we can get to a part where we get to the ultimate goal, which is to allow patients and the people who love them have access to this kind of monitoring. And the nuts and bolts we can certainly work on.
Representative Fettenfung has a question.
Thank you. Rep Knight, and I know you and both Rep Shanley before this, this all comes from a good place. There's a big gaping issue here is that nursing facilities and assisted living facilities are booked into one here, okay? And for people who aren't in healthcare, they might not understand. Usually, that's really two levels of care. Usually when you're in an assisted living facility, you're able to walk, you're able to take yourself to the bathroom with very few exemptions. When you're in a nursing facility, unfortunately, normally it's because you've gotten to such a cognitive decline or physical decline. It really comes down to mobility and level of care. Most people who are in a skilled nursing facility can't take themselves to the bathroom. Yes, there are exceptions, but by and large, there's issues there. So what happens? A lot of times, in order to provide toileting, hygiene, and care, they have to be transferred back into bed so that that type of care can be provided. Some people can't stand long enough to sit on a toilet and whatnot. So that becomes a big issue for me when we're talking about electronic recording, because that person would have no dignity. They would literally be like just laying naked there in the bed. And unless you work in one of these facilities, you probably wouldn't be thinking about that, okay? So again, it comes from a good thing. Now, when you're in assisted living, you're usually in your own apartment, okay, or living facility where you can close the door. It's a little different than a skilled nursing facility where you often have a roommate, and I appreciate you guys trying to figure out how to make that work. In an assisted living where they could close the door to the bathroom or that type of video, I take a big exemption with people who aren't consenting, either because they're not cognitively able to be on a video while they're either showering, using the toilet, or naked because they're having that care tended to. And I think it's just two different things. Assisted livings, you can usually mobilize much better, and skilled nursing facilities is because you need a higher level of care. So it's kind of, this bill would almost be better by separating those two issues out when we're talking about that. Because I just, and Vice Chair Potter, I appreciate when people, your point about people opposing it, not showing up or not talking about this. But from a healthcare provider perspective, that's a big concern that I'd have with this bill, because I would never want anybody, and again, then we have to, I hate to bring this up too, but we have to. In this world with cybersecurity, I don't know what happens if somebody gets hacked and your grandma's, naked body, but really we have to, there are certain electronic monitoring devices that can be hacked very easy. So there's a couple extra steps here that need to be thought out, but I do think it's coming from the right place and the right intention. And I think, hopefully we can work through that.
I appreciate that. Page 6 of the bill addresses some of those concerns that you brought up. It certainly contemplates turning off the camera during those evolutions. And with respect to the responsibility for the existence of the recording and what happened for security of it, it places that entirely on the shoulders of the resident and their family. And so that's a risk you take with the internet these days. I can see, there are really, really good providers of video recording and cloud storage out there, and there's some sketchy ones, and carpe diem for sure.
Absolutely. It's hard though, and it'd be like, well, who's going to be able to turn it off? Who would have that control? And again, that would come down to the device.
Right, and I envision, if this were up and running, I think probably the easiest way is, in a room that is where the resident has agreed to monitoring, and the roommate is, and there's a bunch of stuff in here about roommates too, which is another big issue. That there's a conspicuously placed and easily identifiable camera device. It's got a little shutter on it. You pop that shutter down for your evolution, and then you pop it up when you walk out the door. That sort of thing is used. That sort of thing is used in other secure environments where recording is happening, but you want to turn it on and turn it off at various times. So you want to make it as easy as possible to operate for both staff and resident.
Yeah, that would be a big concern. I'm not sure everybody would have that access, but that's something we can work through. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Yes, Representative Stewart.
Thank you. I have two questions of clarification. The first is there any time limit for which the recordings are available, or some length of time for which they're kept? I couldn't find it in the bill.
There's not a specific time limit for how the recording is kept. There's a section here on page 8 regarding dissemination, and it just says the recording shall be considered the personal property of the resident who installed the device. So there's really not there's not a storage requirement or anything like that.
Oh, and it can just be kept like in perpetuity for for some later
Right.
use. And does it also include audio?
It certainly can. There's a section here in the same section that Rep. Fenton Fung was talking about your options with recording. And I can't point to chapter and verse because it's a long list, but I believe the audio section's in there. You can have audio or not have audio.
Okay, I understand too that this is coming from a good place. I understand that, but I also share
It's tricky.
some privacy concerns about maybe sensitive conversations, or even if there was no audio, sometimes seeing things out of context could also present maybe some difficulties. So
Sure, and these are all issues that come up with electronic video and audio monitoring of any environment in any context. I agree with you. It is a brave new world. I mean, this sort of thing was just not around 20 years ago, where you could put a camera, a fraction of the size of this phone, just stick it up on a wall somewhere, and now people are their every move out in the public space or in this private space of the resident is being recorded. I agree with you that it's a brave new world. I agree with you that it's tricky, but I just don't think there's much going back. And instead of resisting the tide, we should come up with reasonable rules for the deployment of these devices.
thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Before we go to the witnesses, would representatives